Tanzania, Heama Africa, Iswazile, Heama Africa.
Now, the poor are convicted by their daily inhumane conditions and are driven to the streets to put their bodies on the line against rubber bullets and the possibility of imprisonment. The story of children who were gunned down, this is an interesting story in Xola, yeah? I can't remember what year it is, but there was a hearing with TRC of 4 children who were shot by the police. Now, this, of course, there are 2 versions there. The people in the community were saying that, you know, the children did not know there was anybody in the house. The house happened to belong to a member of the security police who was, of course, serving the apartheid regime at the time. So the community says these are children who were walking into a house and they did not know there was anybody. It seemed it was an abandoned house. But in fact, there were people looking after the house, because at that time, the community had taken upon themselves to drive security police outside of the communities. So it was a time of the, how do you say it? The demarcation line.
Yes,
we're being drawn. Who is with us? Who's against us? And that time is coming now again. So the police were being driven out. So these kids walked into this house now. The police have a different version. They are saying that children walked in, the first child who walked in had a container with the petrol and a matchbox. So they shot him down, shot him dead. And they walked out. Apparently there was a crowd and they started shooting. 3 other children died. This was a hearing. Now, I was thinking about the genealogy of fire, the history of fire in the struggle, you know. And I realized, you know, that young boy, let's imagine therefore that he did have a matchbox and some petrol with him. And let's examine, you know, the mind of this young boy. I can't remember the age group now, but these were very young boys, young children. 4 of them, they called them the Tembaletu or something 4. There's a big story. Again, holding the tension between, you know, the middle class and the poor. In the black struggle, that boy, we've never heard of Fanon. Fanon, who beautifully dissected the psyche of blackness and the psyche of, you know, of slaves. I mean, Fanon has given us so much. But that boy had not read anything on Fanon. But that boy had no ambition. That boy had conviction. You know, he worked with the simplicity of politics. He knew that there was an enemy and the enemy was white and the enemy was protected by the police. And that was enough to drive that boy to that place where his own life would be in danger. You know, and I couldn't help, of course, you know, to think of the contradictions of some of the people we hold highly and we regard very highly. I mean, Fanon himself, who got married to a white woman, and you want to think, what is the meaning of that? Wilderson himself is married to a woman, a white woman, and when he was asked in one of the interviews, so you have given us so much. I mean, Frank Wilderson III has given us the beauty of and a new imagination about blackness. You know, he has given us Afro-Pes. And so when he's asked at the end of the interview, so what, a person like you who has given us so much, you know, this new imagination about blackness, and then you go and marry a white woman, explain that. He says, well, and he ends the interview by saying, I am my wife's slave. He leaves you pondering, you know, because what he's basically saying is that blackness and whiteness are irreconcilable. You cannot reconcile whiteness and blackness. One has to die for the other to live. Let's go back to some of the remarks here, and then I think the problem with the problem with fire as a revolutionary tool is that when the fire begins and ends within black spaces and does not go far enough to bend spaces of privilege, and in fact go further to get to spaces of white privilege. Now there are spaces of privilege, then there are spaces of white privilege. And white people live in those spaces. They live in spaces of privilege, and some blacks live in those spaces. But then white people have spaces of white privilege that are secluded, strictly for whites. So if fire, then this answers the question. If fire begins and ends within black spaces, it is arson. If fire is able to go further and go into spaces of privilege and consume spaces of white privilege, then we can consider that kind of fire as revolutionary.